In OTP, one of the most difficult things and one of the least studied things, the most difficult things to understand and one of the least studied things is defense. So, of course, it's really useful to be able to value a player's defense accurately and get a good idea of how much they are helping or hurting you. And in OTP 21, I released a spreadsheet that gave you pretty good values that were representative of how good a player was at each position. I've updated to 22, guys. You now have your player ratings available for 22. You have your weighted defensive ratings. You've got your uh, runs per year influence. I now have a WAR statistic, which is pretty basic. It's just runs per game or runs per year divided by 10. But overall, I've added a couple of other new improvements to the spreadsheet. We also now go out, I've measured out to 240 rather than just 200. So we have a wider range of things available. And as you can see, I now have catcher open. So you can now measure your catcher's defense. I will briefly talk about that. So for 21, arm was a problem. I was not able to accurately measure how effective a catcher's arm would be. Uh, in a neutral league because I had a couple of barriers, but I created a league for 22 that actually is much more accurate. I am fairly confident in these ratings. Obviously, the faster guys in your league are, the more this is going to improve in terms of how valuable it is per tick. But overall, I think these are pretty good representative of how effective arm is at catcher. And we've got second base updated as well. Much less important than it was in 21, second base defense. So another thing you'll notice is I've also normalized these ratings. So your average defense, what will count out to 0, is based on what I imagine your average player at each position is going to look like. So second base isn't hugely different than it was, but it is significant. You set everything down to 100, which is where I had it last year. And you're at -2 wins. So now let's set it back to 200, which is the best you're likely ever going to see. Actually, a little bit better, but that's aside from the point. So this is about a 5.5 win difference. Now let's go back to 21 here. At second base, I had the difference at 6.5 games. So that is a whole win difference for your top end second base fielders these days. 22 is definitely different. Third base is also a little bit wonky here. I believe third base defense is now a little bit more important, relatively speaking. You're more likely to see. Okay, so it's about on par with second base. This is also, I'm going to point out, probably in part due to batting profiles I have set up. I believe third base defense is slightly inflated in its importance in my spreadsheet, and second base slightly deflated. But the way position rankings, I'm very confident in, and overall, I believe these ratings are fairly representative, or these numbers. So how does this work? Well, just take out your player's defensive WAR stat in OOTP, substitute this number, and you have their overall value. Just add that in with their hitter WAR, and you should be good there. You can also, if you want to set your default things to a different number, find out where the intercepts are 0, then change it to whatever you want your default to be and set that as your new 0. So basically, just be adding that number. So if I wanted my default shortstop to be 80 grade range and 200 everything else for some reason, my new default is 23.6 runs. So I will add 23.6 runs to everything else. So now I'm going to go back to my 200 across the board. I would add 26.3 to that 64 number, and I'd be closer to 90, which would be a 9-win thing, just as an example for you guys. Now, I don't currently have this for perfect team or specific franchise mode players. Emphasis on the currently. I'm going to start creating a new spreadsheet where I will be plugging players' ratings in directly so you don't have to do it yourself. But in the meantime, if you do want the precise values of a player, all you have to do is make a copy of this spreadsheet and simply plug in the numbers here instead of your players. So let's say I want to do some card perfect team that's got a 185 range, a 124 error, a 199 arm, and a 55 turn double plays at shortstop. Well, now here we go. They're worth about 21 runs in a regular season and 2.15 WAR. So overall, that's going to give me the approximate value of that player. And since defense is pretty similar across base game and perfect team in terms of its function, I am pretty confident that those numbers are going to hold up in perfect team as well and should give you an accurate idea. If you want to compare two players, simply run the numbers for both of them and subtract them out. If you want to figure out where you should be playing players, you can plug them in at different positions and figure out which combination will give you the optimal runs scored total. Another thing I'm looking at doing in the future is training percentages. So when you have an untrained player, how much is that going to affect their defensive performance? That's coming. I'm also looking to add a weighted or actual position calculator, so you will get what the game believes their position rating is going to be on the bottom if they are fully trained up. And I think that's about it for the spreadsheet. If you guys have any questions, feel free to DM me on Discord. I will link the spreadsheet in the description so you guys can access it. And I'm really excited for people to try this out and be able to get some pretty good numbers on their players. So I hope this is helpful for you guys.